Sabo saw Emu at the reverie and he tried to warn everyone. Just before Lulusia Kingdom was destroyed, Sabo stated that he saw someone sitting on the empty throne in Pangaea Castle. And then boom, a big bang kind of attack happened, and Sabo never got to finish that sentence. Until now. And I will say that a surprising amount of people were surprised that Sabo survived, which to his credit I guess means that Oda did a very good job juxtaposing the elements to make it look like Sabo was on Lulusia. But really the game was given away right from the get-go. And at the time I even did a detailed breakdown of why Sabo was watching the event from afar. So if you look at all of the other characters, their light source is coming directly from above because they're looking up and there's laser beams and it's about to kill them and it's coming from the sky. Whereas if you look at Sabo, his light source is coming from the side, which wouldn't be possible if he was on the island. Instead, what's happening is that he's looking at something very bright and very over there and not at all here where everyone else is looking at it from. No, over there. Which I only bring up because it is so rare that my experience as a lighting designer contributes in any way, shape, or form to talking about One Piece. I'm very involuntarily aware of shading and angles. But what I find quite interesting is that Sabo points out that he arrived here on a Lulusian ship. Because it makes me ask the question of, okay, so how did you get to Lulusia, Sabo? The way I see it is that Sabo had to take a Lulusian ship because he had nothing else. And conveniently, a group of islanders wanted to join the Revolutionary Army after that whole Peachbeard encounter, so it all worked out very conveniently. But it's just interesting that Sabo didn't have his own ship. One possible outcome is that Kuma sent Sabo to Lulusia, potentially through some sort of pre-programmed revolutionary failsafe sequence bequeathed by one Dr. Vegapunk. I mean, Lulusia is kind of in the right direction. Both Lulusia Kingdom and Momoira Island are actually in the first half of the Grand Line, which I think a lot of people forget because so much of our action now is focused in the New World. But that's just one solution. The other would be that Sabo made a potential escape via a certain big news bird balloon, because we don't actually know where in the world he currently is, only that Morgans is harboring 2 other Reverie refugees. And I imagine that Morgans would have seen Sabo much like some sort of delicious ice cream and do whatever he could to obtain a scoop. But something I've also been curious about is why Lulusia, because Sabo himself really didn't have a connection to that island. It was the army commanders who stopped by there initially. So maybe they told Sabo that Lulusia was a friendly kingdom and that it was safe to retreat there. Also, option number 3 is that Sabo stowed away on the Lulusia royalty ship, because their monarchy did attend the reverie, including Princess Komane, who was saved by Helmeppo that one time. So the logic could be that Sabo stowed away, got off on the Lulusia Kingdom, and went, I need a boat to get back to the place. And then conveniently, everyone else was like, you Sabo, the revolutionary hero, we want to join you. Here, take our ship. And us, take our us with you. But Lulusia wasn't just destroyed because these people had been influenced by the Revolutionary Army, because that's been happening all over the world. In fact, in the same chapter that Lulusia Kingdom ceased to exist, it is specifically mentioned by the Elder Stars that it was one of 8 countries to revolt recently. One Elder Star also says that Sabo is a very unlucky man for being here at this particular time. Although another Elder Star says, nah, that's just destiny. Which I found fascinating because it means that they weren't specifically targeting Sabo. It's not a situation where, say, Sabo saw Emu and then they had to track him to Lulusia and do all of the bangs. No, Lulusia was going to be destroyed no matter what. So in retrospect, there's a very morbid thought that Lulusia may not have been the only kingdom erased that day. There are potentially up to 7 other islands that face the wrath of Emu's superweapon. That or something potentially even more sinister. Because what we're going off are the words of the 5 elders. But really, they don't know anything in the grand scheme of things. They're all just blindly following Emu's commands as if he's some sort of all-knowing deity. And to some degree, look, maybe he is. Instead of eradicating all 8 islands, perhaps Emu has an ability akin to future sight. Something that allowed him to know exactly where Sabo would be in the future. And so Lulusia was chosen in advance as the sole target. There's just so many questions that need answering, questions that probably won't be answered anytime soon. Like, why was Sabo even in the empty throne room to begin with? The mission was to save Kuma, so what happened there? I must say though, seeing Moda alive and well was an absolute relief. I legitimately feared that she may have died on Lulusia, although I did have my doubts that Oda would do something like that, or at the very least do something like that and not show Moda in the chapter at all when Lulusia is such a hard word to say, I just want that to be known. Or at the very least do something like that and not show Moda in the chapter where Lulusia gets destroyed. Nailed it. because she's our entire emotional connection to the island. But Oda has in recent times become a bit more arbitrary with which characters actually die and when they die and how they die, which is good because it does mean that survival is no longer a guarantee. But it's moments like this that make me appreciate One Piece like no other series, because Moda is, for all intents and purposes, an irrelevant tertiary character, and yet even she has a story to tell, one that we've been following ever since she met Ace 2 years ago. So when characters like Moda weave their way back into the story, even in a small capacity, it has this ability to trigger a burst of nostalgia within me. But also the idea that each and every narrative brick in Eiichiro Oda's story house is important, and One Piece wouldn't be what it is if we didn't have hundreds of characters like Moda holding up the foundation of this world. It's also another example of why we really need cover stories to be animated. I mean, it's probably a bit late now, but this Moda moment won't hit anime watchers anywhere near as hard, because there is this huge A-shaped connection between Moda and Sabo. Moda knew Ace, so just like the hole in his chest, there is something very full circle about Moda ultimately joining Sabo, who has inherited the will of Ace. But you don't get that without knowing the cover story where Moda made Ace deliver a letter about milk. The best thing the anime could do, and what I think they will do, is that when this scene comes around, they'll probably tell Moda's story in a flashback. But that's not great because then it will look like they are retconning the character of Moda to have this connection to Ace, to kind of force a relationship with Sabo, which is the danger of, doing things out of order. But in conclusion, right now, yes, you could say that Sabo is something of a replacement in Moda's life. It's also nice to know that some other citizens did survive. This wasn't full Ohara. The will of the Lulusia kingdom lives on, and Moda and the citizens will probably play a small role in the downfall of the entire world government. We are also introduced to 4 new members of the Revolutionary Army, or well, sort of new members, because we've seen at least 3 of them before as they were present for the round table meeting. And they're all, how shall I say this, they're all very in keeping with the Revolutionary Army. As this is one of the last big important groups Oda is introducing, I think that he's just going all out with any wacky design ideas he has left over. And I've seen a lot of comments saying stuff like, why is Oda still introducing new characters? Isn't this supposed to be the final saga? Rah, rah, rah. And honestly, I still expect Oda to be introducing new characters right up until the final chapter of the series. That's just what he does. If he has an idea, he vomits it in pencil on a page. Starting with Ahiru, I would describe her as a much more elegant model of Eustace Kid, coming equipped with mech arm, something that you may not have noticed in the anime, because very weirdly, they chose to color the mechanical arm in the same scheme as Ahiru's clothing. A very odd choice by the anime there, and it almost hides the fact that she has the arm to begin with, or more accurately disguises it as a real arm. But Ahiru has joined 3 very exclusive clubs. The first is the inevitable waifu club. That's just a thing that's gonna happen. The second is that she is yet another female named after a bird. Ahiru means duck, very specifically domestic duck, so the most boring kind of duck. And the third is of course the one-arm club, because like so many other characters, Ahiru is missing her left arm, which seems to be Oda's preference. On almost every occasion where a character has an arm removed, it is the left one. The one exception I can think of right now is former Admiral Zephyr, but he is not canon, and you know how I know that? Because if he were, it would almost certainly be his left arm that got removed. What I'm intrigued by is that apparently Ahiru's arm is a functional weapon because she was about to go full Iron Man on Sabo. And despite being Bello Betty's vice commander, I wonder if it was actually Lindbergh who created the arm. Ushiano is our next vice commander, and he joins a very exclusive club of his own, consisting of characters either directly named after or blatantly cow-themed, which even includes figures like Kaku, because despite being a giraffe, he has the Ushi Ushi no Mi, model giraffe. Ushi is one of those words that means a lot of things in Japanese, and they all kind of combine into this general blob of cow animal, hence the name Ushiano. And Ushiano is almost certainly a mink, although I do think there's a possibility that he's a Zoan fruit user of like very plain farm cow fruit, but I think mink makes more thematic sense, because the Revolutionary Army seemed to be a gathering of like-minded individuals of all races coming together for the general betterment of the world. It's almost like seeing Big Mom's dream come to fruition in a more natural way. But the biggest question mark I have is with Vice Commander of the South Army Gyamble, a name which is likely a direct reference to his personality quirk of being seemingly addicted to gambling. I mean, the very first thing he says is, oh, you want to bet on it? And then, because he's obviously broke from all of the gambling, he makes an excuse after he loses. To be fair, the other guy in the bet arguably cheated, but we'll get to that. Gamble is definitely my favorite vice commander at the moment though, just because I'm a real sucker for wacky out there designs. I love the Humpty Dumpty curvature, conversely complemented by the crescent mustache curving in the other direction. Plus he has everything, the slacks, the bow tie, the wacky hat, the everything. He has it all. This dude is crazy cool and I have no idea what he is. Because humans in the One Piece world, yeah, they do vary quite a lot in terms of the size and shape, but even then, this very egg-like man is something else. The closest comparison I have off the top of my head is Dagama from the Corridor Coliseum, the guy who was supposed to be this famed out-of-this-world tactical strategist, but ended up being outplayed by Blue Gilly and then got turned into a green pig. But even then, Dagama doesn't have the perfect egg curve that Gamble has. Really, Dagama is more akin to an Easter egg that was left out in the sun too long. And in any egg-based discussion, I would be remiss not to mention Baron Tamago, although he very specifically had eaten an egg devil fruit. Which then takes us to Jiren, the only of the 4 vice commanders that I don't recall ever having seen before. But his headphones are very reminiscent of German technology, and dare I say that he is eating binoculars, which is a great gag. He saw Sabo on the ship and then cheated when making a bet with Gamble and then just ate the evidence. What binoculars? So I imagine that he does have a devil fruit power of some kind, although not necessarily. I wouldn't put it past a regular person in the One Piece world to just eat binoculars, but maybe something similar to Wapol's Baku Baku no Mi, which allows him to consume literally anything, or to go in the other direction, it could be a food-based devil fruit that Jiren can manipulate into complex objects like binoculars. I love all 4 of them though, because by all rights, they shouldn't work. But they do. We have a cow man, an egg man, a binocular eating man, and in this world, none of that seems out of place. But getting back to some degree of serious now, Sabo calls a very intimate meeting, insisting that only 2 people should be told about the things it is that he knows, which are the 2 remaining founding members of the Revolutionary Army, Dragon and Ivankov. Which is a bit tragic because they have that brief discussion about Kuma, the whole, yeah, so he effed off. Sorry that we made you fight 2 admirals for nothing. Which also reminds me that we haven't heard from Mr. Kuma in a while. In fact, we haven't even heard anything happening on Egghead Island for a while. At this point, we've gone 4 whole chapters without seeing Luffy or any of the Straw Hats, which is exceptionally rare outside of a handful of flashbacks and the Reverie arc itself, but I'm here for it. In fact, I do hope we take some more time before going back to Egghead Island and continue our world tour. There's just so much happening right now, and it's also captivating that over the last month and a half, I've completely forgotten that Egghead is even happening right now. With that said, if I was a betting man, and an egg-shaped betting man, then I would put some cash money that this is the perfect timing for Oda to return to Egghead. To sort of dangle that Sabo carrot in front of us, promising to reveal all of the truths, and then just cut. Because as much as I want to believe that this conversation will be continued in the next chapter, it almost certainly won't. In fact, we may not even see this conversation play out ever. Which is a shame because I really want to see Dragon's reaction to Imu's existence. But one thing I do know is that no matter what comes next, Oda is on absolute fire with this arc. Egghead might be one of my favorite experiences reading the series weekly in ever, and I just can't wait for more.